Muhammad Ali Mall in the Philippines, way back, what was that, 25 years ago? Huh? 25 years ago, was it?
You're old.
No, I don't, was it more than 25? Wow, I was just 10 then. So thanks for your invitation. It's been thanks to the worship team for excellently leading us in worship. From the Northwest, wow, they're really good. And I was up in the balcony working with something for the screen when the young girl sang the Star Spangled Banner. Where is she? Where? Is she in the audience? She's in the kids zone. Was she great or not? Oh goodness. Wow. We're grateful for 21 ethnic fellowships in the Assemblies of God.
Next American Idol.
Next American. And the Filipino Fil-Am fellowship is probably next to the Native American and the African American fellowship, the Black American fellowship, the strongest in terms of numbers, but the mightiest in terms of spirit. Okay. Just don't tell me we do something, but we're seeing a wonderful renewal of God's work all across the United States, the Assemblies of God, and worldwide. Did you know that every single minute, at least 3 persons somewhere in the world are coming to the Lord through the Assemblies of God ministry? Every single minute. And every 45 minutes, somewhere in the world, a new Assemblies of God church is being planted. Every 45 minutes. 100,000 men and women, mostly young, are in Bible schools, over 2,000 Bible schools, studying for gospel ministry. And a church that in the United States is growing as well. We've this year, through the month of June, we've seen 200 new churches begun in the United States, and we're grateful for what the Lord is doing. And you're part of that, and we rejoice. Now, I'm going to put up on the screen, if we could put the pictures. There we go. The theme of this is metamorphosis. Do you know who that is? That's me. That is the young man that has the suit and tie as my high school graduation picture. And then that fall, I was a freshman in college, and that was freshman initiation. And look at me today. Young people out here in the front, look at me. This is what you're going to look like 50 years ago. There is not a bright future ahead of you. It's all downhill from where you're at. Now, with the theme metamorphosis, it would be easy for me to say I've gone through a metamorphosis. But let me just start out by defining terms, and then we'll get into our scripture and talk about the subject for tonight. Romans chapter, this is not my text for tonight, but Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, does a play on words in the Greek New Testament. Do not be conformed to this world. The word there is schema, S-C-H-E-M-A, from which we derive the word scheme, or fashion, the scheme of things. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed. And that's the word metamorphosis. And those, you young men and women are in high school, and you're probably in biology classes, and you've heard the word morphe. Morphe is form or structure. Morphology, the study of form and structure. Meta is the Greek word meaning to change. So metamorphosis is to change form or structure. The difference between the two words, there are synonyms, but there's a difference. Schema is what is outward, and morphe is what is unalterable. So when you look at my picture of when I was 17, and look at me today at 70, I've not gone through a metamorphosis, I've gone through a schematic change. My morphe is male. I was male then, I'm male now. Thank you very much. Appreciate the encouragement. I know some of you weren't sure about that. So schema and morphe. And what the Apostle Paul is saying in Romans chapter 12, 1 and 2 is don't adopt the outward gloss, the outward appearance, the outward fashion of this world, but go through a radical change. Be transformed into the sons and daughters of the living God. Have a fundamental change of nature. The Christ nature formed in us. Paul said it to the Galatians, I am in pains of childbirth until Christ is morphed into you, until Christ is metamorphosized into you. So when we talk about metamorphosis this week, we're really talking about fundamental change. And the topic for tonight that I was given, and boy, Pastor Jared really comes up with the titles, I'll tell you. But it's the metamorphosis of a courageous generation. And I want to begin this series tonight by looking at a particular individual whom Jesus changed and made him a courageous person. You see, it's not enough to just simply talk about metamorphosis as a group of people, because Jesus always is focusing upon the singular. He's focusing upon the one. He's focusing upon you, and he's focusing upon me. So we talk about metamorphosis. We're praying that these days together we will experience what Jesus did for his first disciple. He will do the same for us. So my text is from John's Gospel, chapter 1, verses 40 to 42. John's Gospel, chapter 1, verses 40 through 42. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John the Baptist had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," that is the Christ. And Andrew brought Simon to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You'll be called," and then you have his Aramaic name, Cephas, which when translated into Greek is Petros. When translated into English is Peter. When translated into the underlying noun is rock. And when translated into everyday English is Rocky. He is going to metamorphosize sifting sands Simon into solid rock Peter. And that's his intention for every single one of us who follow Jesus, to fundamentally transform us. Bruce Larson, who is a Christian author and pastor, tells the story about the time when his little boy was 6 years of age. And for some inexplicable reason, he began compulsively sucking his thumb. And the parents tried every which way to get him to stop, and nothing worked. And finally, in sheer desperation, his parents decided to give him a nickname, hoping that nickname would shame him out of sucking his thumb. And the nickname they gave him was Mr. Thumbsucker, or just Thumbsucker. Thumbsucker. Now, there are single people here that someday will be parents. There are parents here, maybe even there are grandparents I see, people my age. So, how many of you think calling the little boy Thumbsucker changed his behavior? Can I see your hand? No hands up. How many of you think it did not change his behavior? Can I see your hand? How many of you chose not to venture a guess because you thought it might be a trick question? Yeah, a lot of you. Well, it was a trick question. All of you were wrong. If you did not raise your hand, you were wrong. It changed the boy's behavior. It got worse. And what had once been a happy, carefree, go-lucky little guy now became a sad, depressed, eyes to the ground, sloop-shouldered, sad little boy compulsively sucking his thumb. And every time they called him Thumbsucker, it just drilled that name into this little boy. One day, Bruce Larson, the pastor, said, "I was in my room praying and I felt the Lord speak to me, not in an audible voice, not in an external voice, but in the quiet inside voice that the Holy Spirit will often talk to us with." He said to him, "Bruce, is this the little boy you prayed to have?" "Yes, Lord." "Well, are you happy with him?" "Well, yes, Lord." "Well, if you're happy with him, why are you calling him Thumbsucker?" And Bruce Larson felt he had no answer to that, and he felt the Spirit say to him, "I did not give you a thumbsucker. I gave you a wonderful little boy, and I want you to call him that." And right then and there, he decided to change the little boy's name, and the name he gave him was Mr. Wonderful. Goes out into the house, and there's his boy sucking his thumb as usual, picks him up, brings him close, looks him in the eye, kisses him on the cheek, hugs him, and says, "Hi, Mr. Wonderful." The boy at first registered no response. But interestingly enough, within 2 weeks, his thumb sucking had dropped off altogether, and he'd gone back to being a happy, laughing little boy. The father had done for him what the boy was unable to do for himself. He had given him the gift of a new identity. And it's at the very foundational nature of grace, because grace is always the gift of a greater to a lesser. It is the gift that the Father gave the Son, and it is the gift that Jesus gave this person whom we know as Simon, or as I like to call him, Sifting Sands Simon. He is going to make something solid of him. Now think about that for a moment. It's the first time the two of them had ever met. Jesus meeting Simon Peter. And sometimes we talk about the authority of Jesus exclusively as it relates to his miracles or his resurrection from the dead. But I want you to see another side of his authority. And that is the first time he meets this young man, Simon. He gives him a name no one else had called him. He took authority over his identity. Can you imagine? Can you imagine you're meeting someone else for the first time and they say to you, I don't really like the name your mama gave you. I'm going to call you by a new name. You would say, hey, that's a lot of chutzpah. How dare you do that? But Jesus, the very first moment he laid eyes on Simon, said, I am giving you a new identity. Now, it took a while for Simon Peter to grow into that. And let's look at that whole process as we thread our way through the Gospels. Because if I had been with Jesus in those moments when he called Simon Rock, I would have said to Jesus, you're wrong. You're wrong on this one. We know now what the Lord was up to. He was out to build his church. Not a building made out of glass and steel and brick, but a body of people. He, the cornerstone, the apostles, the foundation stones. The whole purpose of a foundation stone is to bear weight that is placed upon it. Simon Peter, after the cornerstone, is the first one to believe, so he's the first foundation stone laid in. The whole purpose is to bear weight. And I would have said to Jesus, and by the way, we're now in the 21st century, so we're the living stones high up on the building, to use Peter's terminology from 1 Peter. I would have said to Jesus, you absolutely do not know human nature. You are wrong. This guy is not a rock. He's sifting sands. And the Lord would have probably said to me what he would have said then if I had raised it. That's the problem with you. You do this to yourself and you do this to others. You see what is not, and I see what can be. Now, if you look at Simon's life, you see some reasons why he didn't deserve the word rock. And I want to look at those three things that he didn't deserve to be called rock. One was simply that he was impulsive. He was a man of extremes. If you are going to be a leader, you cannot afford to be impulsive. You cannot afford to just react emotionally to everything that comes along. But Simon Peter is a person who could go hot and cold within a nanosecond. He can blow this way and he can blow that way. One moment in the Gospels he is saying, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. The next moment Jesus says, now that you know that, let me tell you I'm going to the cross. Peter says, oh no, you can't do that. So one moment he's Lord, the next moment Jesus doesn't know what he's doing. One moment Jesus says, I'm going to wash your feet. And Peter says, you're not going to wash my feet. And Jesus says, if I don't wash your feet, you'll have no part of me. And Peter impulsively says, and I paraphrase, then give me a bath all over. That's impulsive. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus says, don't take a sword. You know, what's Peter do? He impulsively reaches out and cuts off the ear of the slave or the servant of the high priest. And one of the most impulsive moments comes when Jesus has been, after the resurrection, out in the Lake of Galilee. I was just there a few days ago, in fact, and remembering this incident. Jesus had told them to meet me in Galilee, and they'd gone up to Galilee. He'd been, for whatever reason, delayed in getting there. And the disciples, Peter's gotten a group of 6 of his friends to go out fishing with him, and they fished all night. And Jesus stands on the shore. It's not yet dawn. It's just at the crack of day. And Jesus calls out across the water, have you caught anything? And they said, no, we haven't. And he says, well, throw the net on the other side. Now, they'd fished all night, and they were tired. Night is the good time for fishing, and the fishing occurs in the northern end of the lake where there's warm springs. And so, something about that voice, though, perhaps triggered a memory that 3 years earlier they had a miraculous catch of fish. It's talked about in Luke chapter 5. So on the basis of the stranger whom they do not clearly know who he is, but maybe something